Firespinner Chapter Two, Orphan Free. Roy expected to wind up in the Woodsman's Guild Hall, or maybe in the back room of a local saloon. He hadn't expected the offices of Nolan and Grunwald, Solicitors General. "I could see you with a bearded axe," Roy said. "But Corporal Grunwald as an officer of the court? Now that is truly shocking."
"Anyone can slice trees," Grunt said. "But there's more to the business than that. And there's more of a future into clerking, even in a place like this, than just cutting lumber day in and day out."
The chair in front of Ben's desk was plush and comfortable, cradling Roy's abused back and sides in velvety softness. "This is mighty nice, Grunt. You done good for yourself." Grunt sat down in his chair and fished through the drawers of the desk.
"That calls for a celebration. Still a whiskey man?"
"Gave it up years ago." He froze, looking like a child stealing sweets.
"Oh?"
"Long story. I'd rather hear about why ensorcelled trees are attacking town on the regular. Based on how fast the guild responded, this isn't an isolated incident, is it?"
"It's not."
Ben switched drawers, but kept rummaging.
"Give it 5 minutes. The sauna boys are supposed to join us, and I figured I could fill all of you in at once."
Roy pondered that for a moment. He'd heard feelings about the sauna were pretty strong up north, almost as strong as people felt about the Tetslani down by the southern border. But Grunt didn't seem concerned about two of them butting into guild business. Either they were well known in town, or the situation was just that bad. Maybe both. "You know these two?"
"Not personally, but the guild captain seems to think they're trustworthy."
Ben shrugged.
"He's a good judge of people, and I've never had any problems with the sauna personally, so I'm not that worried. Plus, they live in town, not across the border in the treaty lands, so they can't be that close to the local tribes."
Roy's brow furrowed. "Really? We're a good day's horse ride from the border, aren't we?"
"It is closer to 2, said a voice behind him.
Roy jerked up and out of the chair, yanking a bead of fire out of his cufflink and rolling it ready between finger and thumb of his right hand. Two tall, thin sauna men stood in the doorway of the office, dressed in the tanned leather pants common to their people, but wearing the collared denim shirts favored by most frontier Colombians. Neither one carried weapons. Roy blew a breath out, waited for his side to stop spasming, and slipped the fire back into its home. "Hearth fires, you two give a man the frights." The sauna in the lead inclined his head to one side, studying Roy with open curiosity. "You must be the man Mr. Grunwald was expecting today. Our counterpart in this task. Allow me to introduce my brother, Marsh Reeds, and myself, River Reeds." Marsh held his palm out, with all fingers pointed upwards, in the traditional sauna gesture of greeting. He prefers to be called Marshall. "Does he now?" Roy studied the brothers a little closer and noticed that, at a glance, the beaded belts they wore were the only way to tell them apart, for otherwise they were as alike as a man and his doppelganger. Although Marshall was most likely not a magical duplicate of his brother. "Does he speak for himself?" "No." Marshall laughed silently, and his brother continued. "Please call me Reeds." "Roy Harper." Roy folded his thumb over his first and last fingers, holding the middle two up to form a chimney and making the sign of the hearth. "Warm hearth fires, Mr. Reeds." Grunt cleared his throat.
"Reeds is part of his given name, Roy, not a family name. Sauna names don't work that way."
"My mistake." Roy lowered himself back into the chair, barely hiding a wince in the process. "We're all here now, Grunt, unless you want your guild fixer here for the speech, too."
"Not necessary. This is just so you three know what you're up against."
Ben drew a wrinkled, tattered sheet of paper out of his desk and handed it to Reeds.
"This man came through town 5 weeks ago. We think he's been binding trees and setting them against the walls for the last month or so."
Reeds handed the paper to his brother.
"The land here is disturbed. The trees may be moving on their own, in response to it. Such is the way of the forest. The guild hedge mages haven't noticed any changes in the land in the past 2 months, but the trees are far more aggressive than in the past. Something specific is riling them up, and he's the most likely person to do it."
Grunt pulled another sheaf of papers out.
"I have the surveyor's records if you want to look."
"Unnecessary." Reeds pulled out an odd, heavily carved stick from a pouch in his belt.
The land has changed in the last 2 months, but not in the lay of river or stone, in the lines of the spirit which your hedge mages do not trace.
The carvings on the stick seemed to move and shift of their own volition.
Reeds held it up for them to study. We can cast the kennet if you wish.
I don't doubt your divinations, Reeds. It's true there are things in these hills the Sana understand better than us. Marshall passed the paper to Roy. But our guest could easily be why. Dust and ashes! Roy recognized the paper immediately. He probably still had his own copy of it, somewhere in a trunk left from his army days. The Volcanus militia had printed thousands of them at the start of the Lakeshire War, and many Colombian regulars like himself had gotten copies when they took a hand in the conflict. A glance at the face in the center of the page was all it took for him to remember who it was. Major General Sir Hezekiah Oldfathers, first in line to Lordship of the Stone Circle, Knight of the Phoenix-born, Druid Emeritus of Lakeshire County, Columbia. Commanding Officer, 1st Lakeshire Druidic Division. Once the second most powerful druid in the nation. Wanted traitor. 2,000 silver mark reward, dead or alive. Roy threw the paper back on Grunt's desk. Orphan Free is here? Really, Grunt? Any other surprises I should know about? You don't need 2 or 3 of us, you need the whole company back if you plan to take him on. Then at least they can bury us all in one place.
Orphan Free? Reeds asked.
He's guaranteed to bury you before your parents, so you never have to worry about being an orphan, Grunt explained. Old fathers, young sons, that's the joke.
It's a joke?
No, Roy snorted. What next? You got a 4th brother walking hidden up here too? No giants, just the druid. Grunt's lips formed a humorless smile. But we have the right person here for that, too. Roy leveled a finger at him. Don't you start.
The 2 of you know this man?
Not personally, Reeds, Grunt said. Just by reputation. He made a nasty one for himself during the war. And before, and after, Roy scowled. This isn't some druidic initiate, Grunt. Old Fathers came up during the golden era of Colombian druidry. If Morainehenge still stood today, he'd be running it. He's probably the most powerful and skilled druid left on this continent. You think he's trying to level this town, so you propose we go after him with 5 men?
4, actually. Guild Agent O'Hara is a woman, Reeds pointed out. Marshall nudged his brother. Yes, fine. My brother would also like to include Widow Blythe.
I'm not sure. No! Roy cut Grunt off definitively. We are not feeding a 6th person into the carnage. It is simply not going to help. Harp. Grunt gave his old friend a patient look. It's been 10 years. General Oldfathers doesn't have an army anymore, and he's not getting any younger. Age and magic don't tie together like age and strength, Grunt. Plus, we've got you and O'Hara, so it's not like we're helpless on that score.
Reeds cleared his throat. I have some skill in the arcane as well. And the widow was once in the service of your lady in Burning Stone.
Outside of the cants and rituals, I don't think Hearthkeepers practice a whole lot of magic. We're talking about orphan free, Grunt, Roy snapped. It doesn't matter if we're all master volcanists on a mountain covered in pine trees. Fine, we'll even the odds, Grunt said, refusing to match Roy's intensity. You know plenty of other fire spinners for hire. Go to the Cephomore Tower and send a message to a few. Call up the strongest man. Roy got out of his seat even faster the second time, the pain in his side an echo to the thud of his fist on the desk. Don't say it. Ignis Fatus, Grunt. I know magic isn't your thing, but you should know creatures like that here when you name them. And they're likely to answer. Going to one hat in hand never solves problems. Not even a problem like Orphan Free? Old Fathers is just a man, Grunt. That isn't, no matter what it's called. I'll take your word for it, Harp. Grunt sighed. Listen, I asked for your help, but there's no hard feelings if you don't want to. We're not soldiers anymore. No one's going to hold it against you if you decide to sit this one out. Roy pushed away from the desk with a grunt and smoothed the front of his jacket. Fine. If that's how it is, then that's how it is. It was good to see you, Grunt, circumstances notwithstanding. Grunt nodded once, then turned his attention to Reeds. Tell me about these divinations of yours and what they suggest is going on up on the mountains. It was a dismissal, and Roy knew it. He collected his hat from the rack and showed himself out of Grunt's office. Marshall stared at him the entire way. Firespinner is written, illustrated, and performed by Nate Chen.